Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz bassist and singer Nicki Parrott. We caught up with her on April 20th, 2020 to talk about this new COVID-19 world, along with her latest 2019 CD, From New York to Paris. She is originally from Australia and began on the piano at the age of 4, switched to double bass at the age of 15, came to New York in 1994, and has had quite a musical ride. Get to know her and enjoy.
Hey, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. Obviously, in this very unique time in our history, I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's nice to talk to someone, and happy to do it.
So, during this time, artistically speaking, or creatively speaking, are you producing music? How are you filling that void?
About to prepare for a couple of albums, one on Arbors and one on Venus, which is a Japanese record label. And whenever things get going again, I hope to record those 2 albums. And basically, I've been trying to use resources that I don't get time for in my normal musician life, which is resources like discoverdoublebass.com, online lessons, brushing up on techniques like bowing techniques, all kinds of stuff that I don't normally practice that in depth. But I have the time to practice them more than I normally would, and playing along with records that I've loved since I was a teenager. Basically trying to keep the excitement about music alive and just listening to a lot of music, all kinds of music. For me, it's about how to keep inspired. So I'm watching interviews. I'm just doing as much as I can to keep my inspiration about music, because to be honest, I'm really a live performer.
Yeah.
And so I haven't been doing the Facebook Live concerts from home because I prefer to be interactive with other musicians. Not to say that I won't. I'm just saying for now I haven't done that. I've done a little bit of recording and sent that over to Europe, and then other people have added tracks to that. But that's just for our own amusement. That's not for public consumption. So I haven't put it this way, and I haven't really been able to profit anything from the. I prefer not to. I prefer to just work on my music here and not worry about the trying to get an audience to PayPal me or any of that stuff. It's just not how I prefer to do things. So that's basically what I'm doing.
So talk to me a little bit about your beginnings. You're from Australia. You began on the piano and switched to double bass at 15. Talk to me a little bit about what got you hooked on jazz.
Yes, so I had a classical upbringing from a very, very early age. And so I fell in love with playing music and listening to music from a very, very young age. I did classical piano for a lot of years, classical flute. My sister started playing tenor saxophone and clarinet. She also was playing classical music, but with some friends from school in a town that was an hour and a half basically a suburb of Newcastle, which is about an hour and a half north of Sydney. It's kind of like the Philadelphia of the East Coast. You know what I mean? It's kind of like close to New York, close to Sydney, but it's not Sydney. But there was a lot of really talented musicians living in Newcastle at the time. So my sister had a band, and she wanted me to join a band, but she didn't want a flute player. She wanted a bass player. And there was one at school. So I took it home. It only had 3 strings on it. But there was a bloke across the street that he played a bass in a Dixieland band. And he said, you don't need the low string. Nobody hears it. So I tried on a 3-string bass for a while until I realized that I wasn't going to get pretty far on. I wasn't going to get that far on a 3-string bass. But I basically taught myself for the first 2-3 years just by transcribing bass lines, playing along, and then we had like a high school band that we started, and we just all like cassette tapes. We all used to pass around cassette tapes. So I just grabbed whatever I could and copied whatever I could. And we used to get together as a group, and I'm happy to say that all those musicians I met in high school are full-time musicians and have been their entire life. A couple live in Europe, most live in Sydney, my sister lives in Brooklyn, New York, but we all stuck with music, which is quite amazing, actually.
You teach as well, and you've learned and been around really amazing, legendary people like Houston Person and Scott Hamilton and Bucky Pizzarelli and Randy Brecker and a lot of names. Talk to me about what the legends and luminaries gave you that you in turn gave to students.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Bucky now because he just unfortunately passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
You know, my husband and I used to drive him around to gigs. He lived about an hour from here. And we'd pick him up, we'd drive him to the gig and drive him home. And we got to learn a lot about his history. And, you know, these guys came up in hard times, you know, as well. You know, they just, they had to really work hard at their craft. And I think that's the biggest message that I try to pass on to students, is that you get good at what you do a lot of. And so if you keep practicing and keep working on the things that you may not be so good at, which is what I'm trying to do now, and just stick to it and fake it till you make it and all that kind of stuff, eventually it will pay off. So if I think about those legends and think about how hard they worked to get that good and how hard they worked to develop their sound, you know, if you listen on the radio, you immediately identify, oh, that's so-and-so sound. But that comes from many years of playing and practicing and working on your sound. So that's something I think about and try to pass on as well. I think the biggest challenge is to keep students interested in. There's a lot of distractions that they have. So keeping students interested in music, which is why listening to music is very important, because I don't think you get the feel unless you listen or play along with records. I don't think you really get the feel for it. So that's what I try to instill. Is yes, you can practice the basics. Everyone should, but there's more to it than that. There's how do you get a great feel for this music? How do you develop your sound? How do you know what I mean? How do you contribute on a bigger level than just playing scales? You know. So that's what I try to think about and impart to students.
What do you like best about being a musician?
You know, what I like best is pretty much what we're not able to do right now, which is be on stage. I mean, honestly, I feel like the travel, the being away from your family and being out there and the flight delays and all that, I feel like that's what we get paid for. On stage, for me, is where the thrill is. So interacting with an audience, interacting with musicians on stage, I think from what I gather, we all didn't expect that to suddenly and abruptly. I mean, I literally finished my Europe tour was supposed to go till April. The last European tour was supposed to go to April 6th, and it was chock full of great gigs. So I finished it short on April 12th, flew home on the 13th, and fortunately have, as far as I know, have remained corona-free. So but the main thing is that all of a sudden it was like, okay, now your tour is cancelled. Everything's cancelled to, well, hopefully July or more. We don't know. And it's like adjusting has been quite something, because it's also like, wow, these tours also take 2 years to build. A lot of tours in Europe are biannuals. So every 2 years you get one of these really nice chunky, every day is something different tours, and so that's been quite a change for me, because you also get into a momentum once you land and once you get on stage with the musicians you'll be playing a tour with mostly for that month or that period of time, you get into a rhythm, and it's all about the gig at the end of the day. That's kind of the payoff for getting in a car, driving, flying, whatever you have to do to get there. So the interaction is what I miss the most right now.
We're going to get to the end of this. We're going to see live music again. And my question to you is this. What revelations do you hope both musician and fan get from this time away when we do return?
I don't think we'll take it for granted again, in a way. That take gigs for granted or take the ability to sit in a concert hall ever again. That's the beauty of that alone. That's a big one. I don't think I have the answer to that yet, to be honest. I'm still figuring this out. Because we don't know when we'll be on stage again or how it will be when we are. I'm still forming an opinion on that. But for me personally, if I ever took gigs for granted before, I certainly will never take them for granted again. How wonderful it is to be able to share music to others on stage, and have an audience receive what you do and react to what you do. It's something that I'll think about differently, put it this way, from here on out.
Well, hey, thank you for taking a minute to talk to me today. I really appreciate your time. And before you go, would you mind doing a quick plug for my radio show?
Of course.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Australia, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Nicki for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.